This might be my last video defending the King James, because I feel better now knowing that there are people like me out there who are on the right side of this argument. And I also feel better believing, at least believing, that a lot of the people around me care about, if not on YouTube, the people around me care about what the text, what else the text is saying. All those verses that are not in your modern Bibles. The people that read from these Bibles, the people that read from the critical text, especially around me, they care about those verses. They quote those verses even though those verses aren't in their NASB or their ESV. They quote those verses. They know the story of the woman caught in adultery. They know the story in John chapter 5. The whole story, okay? They know, okay? It's not like because they don't have the King James Bible that they don't care about these things. It's not like because they don't have a King James Bible that they've never studied these things. Moving on. I just got done watching a video by, well, these videos I saw them both before. My man Will Kenney, he's an old man, but I love him because he says one thing that I believe you can't get past. No matter how much you make fun of the King James, no matter how much the King James is wrong, one thing you can't get past is the fact that we already have the Bible in 1769. Complete, fully loaded, ready to shoot. Okay? Undefeated, undisputed. King James, Textus Receptus, 1769, 1611. Okay? And then not only that, and this is another thing that Will Kenney keeps showing you forth, and they hate it when he does it. But people go after the King James. He says, well, we can prove to you that the King James has errors. And he'll say, okay. And he'll go to the Geneva. He'll go to the Great Bible, the Tyndale. He'll go all the way back in time and show you that all the Textus Receptus Bibles before the New King James, all of them said the same thing. They used the term for Easter, for example, in, I think it's Acts chapter 12. They used, they had everything in them. They had all the verses in there, especially the two controversial ones, the ending of Mark and 1 John 5:7. Okay, they've had all the verses are in there. If I go over here to this Geneva Bible, it's going to not only say things that are exactly in certain passages what the King James is saying, and in those passages where it doesn't say what the King James is saying, it's going to seem like the King James is a lot more clear and a lot more modern, and it is a lot more modern in its time, within its time. Okay? Moving on, Will Kenney always goes to the modern translation, I mean the older translation, to show you where the King James comes from. People go up against the King James like the King James didn't come from other texts, other Bibles. Like it's the only one of its kind. No, it's not. It comes from a chain. Okay? And I'm understanding the more and more I listen to these King James onlyists that the King James, the reason why they are King James only is because they know that the King James Bible, no other Bible quoted like it after its development. There was no other development like the King James Bible. Now my New King James, yes, my New King James is more modern, and it you know, to me it is the best thing to call an update. It doesn't call itself an update. No one's calling it that. I'm calling it that. I think the New King James is, you know, a better update. And what else I got? I got my MEV over here. It's a better update than my MEV. It's a better update than any other. It is what you call an update. Other Bibles, they're just updating the language, or they're just updating, they're just getting rid of certain words, or they're just keeping things the same, or they're, you know, but the New King James is the best excuse for an update amongst all the Texas Receptus Bibles after 1769. And the New King James, moving on, the New King James to me is today's standard. For me, it is the standard after the King James, you know, keeping up with its father, the King James Version. This is the new standard. This is if you modernize or change the wording in the King James any better than the New King James is done, it's not a King James, okay? Like this MEV over here, it's not, you know, it's not keeping up like it claims with the King James. Some of the things that, you know, like if you do a Bible and then in a footnote at the bottom it says, well, literally in the Hebrew or literally in the Greek. Why couldn't you just leave it the way it was? And if you're trying to make a Bible better after so many updates or whatever, why didn't you just leave it what it says in the Greek in the Greek? Or why didn't you just leave what it says in the Hebrew in the Hebrew? But I believe that I'm at rest, I'm at peace now. What I love about what I love about this guy, Eddie Crum. I watched the debate with him with Will Kenney. He said one thing that Will Kenney and I both agree with. Okay, I'm not a King James onlyist. I don't read the King James. I read the KJV ER from time to time, and I'm an NKJVer. I'm a, you know, NKJV is my text. But Eddie said a great thing. He said that just because something is later, because they keep throwing this, you know, James White and a lot of other people, including people that went up against Will Kenney, keep going to this garbage. They keep saying, oh, well, the King James came from later manuscripts. And I'm like, so? What's that have to do with the price of demons in China? Like what does that have to, are they biblical? Are they biblical manuscripts? When I read the King James and I compare it with an ESV or a modern translations, those are not manuscript differences. Those are variants. There's a difference in variance, and most of the time, you know, when you translate all this to the New King James, what you find out is that the variants in here are better than both the King James and the modern version. Because it's the truth. Okay? Now, speaking of that, moving on, the King James is not the standard because it's perfect. It was perfect in its time, but it's not the standard because it's perfect today. It's the standard because it's the grandfather of all these other translations. And if you think that these other Bibles have not looked at the King James to get some of their writings, their variants, or add to their variants, or etc., in their modern version, you've lost your head. If you think nobody's looking at the New King James or the King James and trying to compete with these in order to, you know, create their ESV or create their NASB, you've lost your head. They can sit there and criticize these and call this an inferior text all they want to, but they are looking at the King James and the New King James, and they are competing, and that's how they make better variants in their versions. Okay, but it's not a matter that it's not like the King James was ever a heretic. Okay, now the people that read from the King James Bible back in its time, they understood that Easter actually means Passover. They understood that that word should have been Passover. They understood that Lucifer is just a name in Isaiah chapter 14 to separate the morning star or day star Satan from the morning star day star Christ. Because they know that if you don't use something in there to differentiate, you will end up calling Christ and the devil the same type of genre. Okay? New King James is the last Bible that ever called Satan Lucifer in Isaiah chapter 14. Last Bible to ever do that was the New King James. There will never be. That MEV is the latest edition of the King James, latest update. It does not use the term Lucifer. Okay? It was the New King James is the last version of the Bible to use the word robbery, which is the perfect word in Philippians 2 and 5. Okay? Perfect word to talk about Christ humbling himself, okay, in the poem there, and becoming Christ for us and dying for us on the cross. The poem there of him rejecting he didn't reject it, see, I'm talking like the modern version, but giving up his place, okay, of power and authority, and humbling himself like a man. This is the last Bible that's going to say it right, the way it is. The MEV had to tamper. You know, you're not allowed to put Lucifer in that Bible. You're not allowed to put, you know, you're not allowed to leave anything unfootnoted or you know. And now, the good thing about that MEV is only certain things are footnoted, but if they do an update, which they probably will in another 5 years or less, we'll probably do another update, and it's going to do like all these modern versions, add more footnotes, because that's what it's trying to be. Now, the New King James, a lot of people, because of the footnotes, which I don't give a rat's behind about the footnotes, I only care about the footnotes when I read my CSB, because the footnotes remind me what they took out of the standard text. And it's in the bottom, in the footnotes, instead of in the text where it belongs. But I only worry about footnotes when I read modern versions. When I'm reading the standard text, I don't worry about footnotes. I don't give a rat's behind what the footnotes say, because I know that this is standard text. Okay? So, in closing, Will Kenney, his debates with, and this is like my second time watching these two debates, with C.J. Cox, and Eddie Crum, or Eddie Kroom. I think it's Kroom. It's pronounced Kroom. C-R-U-M-E. Kroom, I think. The E turns it into Kroom instead of Crum. But, him, you know, both these guys were getting, like, upset with Will Kenney, because Will Kenney will not back down and accept the fact that a 400-year-old Bible has errors. And this is something that Will Kenney said today that I never thought of, but it's true. All the Bibles before the King James, and even coming from other texts, are saying the same things. Even Bibles that never made, you know, the list. Bibles that never made the market. Somebody owns them. There may be some churches that have tried to hold on to them for a while, and there's scholars out there that have endorsed these Bibles and that, but they never made the market. They never made the list. They're not on that translation spectrum. Okay, they're not there. Okay, but they were made from the majority text, Byzantine Texas receptacles. Okay, and they say the same thing. Even some that are more modern, in between the New King James and the King James, but never made the market. New King James made the market. They didn't. Okay? They say what the King James says. I know a guy here on YouTube who, he talks about his Bible that he did, and he needed a text. He used the King James text. And when I read, you can go online and look at his Bible. I forget what it's called. You can go online and look for his Bible online. He shows you the link on the video. But this is a Bible that never made the market. And that Bible is like my New Life version over there. It has all the verses in it, and it has all the King James renderings. Some, they've done a better job than the King James. Some, they're like spot on with the King James. But again, the King James is not the standard because it's perfect and it doesn't have any errors. The King James is the standard because it was here first. Will Kenney's not saying that. I'm saying it. Now, Will Kenney seems to say that it doesn't have no errors. It didn't have no errors in its time. But today they would consider that an error. He needs to understand that. But I agree with him. There's no, you know, like, we shouldn't even be debating the King James. As long as you have your right to read your modern versions, with what all their verses missing and all like that, and as long as you have, long as we're free to read a New King James and all like that, there's no reason for us to debate the King James. The King James, okay, was perfect in its time. Now, you go to people like James White, it's not so much about the King James, it's about the text. He's still attacking the text. But I can show you in the CSB where they just copied from the text and didn't really do any homework. How many Bibles do I have here in my apartment where they did their homework instead of just following some text? Well, the Amplified is one of them. CSB, yes, they've done some homework that, you know. The NASB, it's done its homework on making something sound better and come off the tongue better, but it hasn't done its homework on the variants in between, or I should say variation in between the King James and the critical text. See, someone that's really doing their homework would put the two texts together. Someone that's doing their homework would put the two texts together. They wouldn't just say, well, I have to pick the critical text because that's who I work for, or I have to pick the Textus Receptus because the people want a King James. Put the two texts together and put the best of the two texts in one Bible. You can't do that? Okay, well that's the problem. You can't do that? That's the problem. But in closing, there is no debate for the King James. I'm done arguing about it. I have my standard. This is my standard. The King James is the standard, but this is the new standard. And I believe that, James White needs to go up against the new King James. Mark Ward needs to go up against the new King James. Stop going up against a 400 and some year old Bible that had a right to be archaic in its time. You're going by the fact that, I understand you want to stand up against King James onlyism, but don't stand up against King James only and become like King James onlyism. Oh, well, we're critical text onlyism. Well, you won't come out and say that, but that's what you're doing. Both what was rebuked in the critical text from Westcott and Hort, the things that was rebuked, the verses put back in the Bible, okay, the changing of the footnotes in our modern day Bibles, okay, I'm noticing these things, I'm paying attention to this, okay, deserve a clap. They deserve a clap. Some of the footnotes, especially in the CSB deserves a clap because of the footnotes and because of trying to be more spiritual and inspirational in certain passages of Scripture, like the King James, but in a modern sense. I think they deserve a clap. Okay? But the hypocrisy, as I said in another video, is we're adding to the Bible. And we are changing words. And we are saying, people are saying stuff like, oh, well, translations for everyone. These people like this translation. These people like this kind of translation. These people like this kind of translation. Okay, like, if the Bible is male gender dominant, if the Bible is a male chauvinist, it still is a male chauvinist whether you mess with the variants or not. It's still a male chauvinist. If the Bible's male dominant, it's male dominant. There's nothing you can do about that. And then if you decide that, sorry, I forgot to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. If you decide that you're going to only go after what's new and never worry about what's original, okay, well, that doesn't change it. You just don't know. But, you people saying, oh, well, I need a Bible that's gender neutral. Why? Why? Oh, you know what I'm saying? There's something wrong with you that you need a Bible that fits you instead of you fitting into the Bible. Okay? If the Bible is male dominant, all the women say amen. Okay? There's no reason to say, oh, well, the women just want to hear. You say brothers and sisters instead of saying brethren. Bite me. That's dumb. I don't care about that. My MEV, my New American Standard, and my CSB. They're worried about that general neutral crap. I don't care. And I wouldn't care about it if it was female dominant. Okay? But the point is, in closing, again, Eddie Kroom said that, and all the yelling and getting angry, all the back and forth that he was doing with Will Kenney. He agreed with Will Kenney about a lot of things, especially near the end of the video. And one of them was that it doesn't matter whether our Bible, the King James, the Textus Receptus, okay, comes from later manuscripts. And James White, listen to him real good, he cannot be 100% sure of everything he says. And the debate that I watched with him today, the guy said one thing to James White that I agree with. He told James White that you don't know either. And how do you know? You don't. You want to say that it's that way after 400 and some years. You want to say it's that way because you want to sell your LSB. Because you're one of the top guys on the committee and you want it to sell. This knucklehead brings in a brand new copy of the LSB with him every time he goes to a debate from now on. Because he wants to sell his LSB Bible. And he's willing to say things about the Bible in general to make sure it gets sold, to make sure people buy that translation. Okay? But the Bible is a done deal. And you know, when I read this KJV ER over here, and it lets me know that people know and they knew what the King James is saying, regardless of the old language and the archaic wording. They know what it's saying. And they know what it's saying today in 2025. But people want to sit there and build arguments because they can't stand nobody to call the King James a standard. If the King James is not the standard, your grandmama wasn't really your grandmama. She's just some old hag that you had a crush on. If the King James is not the standard, okay, George Washington was never president. Abraham Lincoln was never president. And the presidency today ain't got nothing to do with George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. The King James is the standard, not because George Washington was perfect or Abraham Lincoln was perfect, not because the Republican Party was perfect, but the King James is the standard because it was here first. And all the Bibles before it were in the same family. The verses and the chapters that are in the King James Bible were put in by its own genre. It was put in there by the Textus Receptus group. They put the chapters and the verses in the Bible. The only thing the critical text has done is come in and piggyback off of an old 400 and some text and compete with it by piggybacking off of it, competing with it to make their text look better. Westcott and Hort did the same thing, only worse. But we have moved away from Westcott and Hort. That's why it's no longer called the Alexandrian text. It's called the critical text. But we still hold on to the same nonsense of trying to argue a 400 and some year old Bible like the Alexandrian text did. When the Revised Standard and the American Standard first came out, they were out to compete with the King James, and now these two Bibles have had more updates, I think, than the rest of them. So to me, they're still trying to compete. And now they done went from competing to just simply trying to take over and say whatever they want to say in the process. Okay? Even adding the scripture and, so I'm glad. I'm going to miss this New King James if they ever update it. I'm going to miss it. Because I know they're not going to update it like it is. The secret place in Psalms 91 needs to stay secret place. That word is not there because people don't understand it. The secret place is there because we are talking about the presence of Almighty God. There is no monkey shelter where Christians are hiding in. It's the presence of God. It's the secret place. There's a reason why these words are translated the way they are. And only the King James and the New King James will say secret place. All the other modern versions, including my MEV, do not like that word secret. They do not like that word secret place. They don't like it. They think it's a mistranslation. It's not. But, I just thank God that I don't have to go to the King James. I have the New King James. And I have Bibles like the KJV where I can go and find out what the King James is trying to say in this modern day time. But it's still the standard. I don't care how hard it is to read. I don't care how many variants that you can, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, the people, like Will Kenney was trying to explain it to C.J. Cox. The people in the King James people back then, they knew that the word Easter should have been translated Passover. And King James people never had a problem with it being Easter because they knew that Easter came right around the time of the Passover or the Festival of Unleavened Bread or whatever. Okay, so they knew that Easter was around. So the text doesn't say that they celebrated Easter. So I don't see an argument, And then C.J. Cox and what his name, Mr. Kroon, Eddie Kroon, just going after Will Kenney about, what the Bible said, what the King James says in Job. Job is one of them places where there's a lot of variants in the book of Job that are totally different than today. And, but again, like Will Kenney said, most of the translations, all of them, before the New King James, say the same thing. So why is that a textual problem and not a ancient text problem? Why is that a error instead of just simply ancient English or ancient, because that's what it is. It is ancient English. It's not an error. Ancient English. You can't go 400 years and pick a fight and wake Grandpa up from the dead and pick a fight with him and say, hey, teach us. We're going to do some MMA when MMA wasn't even around when he was around. James White is retarded for doing this. So is Mark Ward. So is anybody that thinks that they're going to take this old man, because this Bible right here is old. This is going back to 1982. We're talking 1769. You're not going to take this old man and keep picking a fight with him. It needs to stop. It needs to stop. Okay? And that's one thing I won't do. I'm not a King James onlyist, but I don't need to read the King. I don't need to read the King James. I have the update of the Standard right here. This is the best update of the Standard. There's others, but this is the best. Because you can actually get theological with this. You can actually study this and not just like look at it and say, okay, King James. Oh, it seems to be spot on right on with the King James. No, this does not. This is not spot on with the King James. This is an update to the King James, even though they don't call themselves that. But compared to what we call an update to the King James, this is a better update to the King James than everything else out there. And it is my favorite. I love the New King James. I also love the CSB. I also love the MEV. But to be fair in argument, you shouldn't even be arguing against the King James. You should be arguing with the New King James. You want to argue against the Texas Receptors, you go to the New King James. You don't go to the King James. That would be a better argument. But a lot of the stuff that CJ and Eddie are complaining about, and many other people that went up against Will Kenney, it's old English, dude. That's the way they described things back then. That's not an error in Scripture. That's old English. Okay? And I wish Will Kenney was in some of these debates with James White. He would lose. Because James White, he's so arrogant, and he'll just shut you down and talk to you like you're still in elementary school. But the thing is, what Will Kenney's saying is true. That's the way they describe things. It's not for you to make them, because if you go and you fix the King, this is what Will Kenney is saying. If you go and you fix the King James and make it talk right, you got to make the Geneva talk right. You got to make the Tyndale, the Wycliffe, the Great Bible, the Bishop's Bible, all the Bibles that came before the King James. You got to make them all talk right, because they all talk like that. And as you go in time, Wes Huff showed a Bible translation. He showed the Tyndale. Boy, you talking about English have changed. Oh my God. And if you read that English and look at the variants, you'll find out the variants are the same if you can read the English at all. I can barely read the English in the Geneva Bible. Let it go. Don't go from defending yourself against King James onlyism to being a heretic that's trying to get rid of the King James Bible. That's what most people are doing. When you watch YouTube, that's what most people are doing. They just go after the King James. Look, if your battle with a King James onlyist was yesterday, why are you hating on the King James today when ain't nobody in this group read the King James? And if they did read the King James, you're not hating on your version. Why are you hating? People kill me with that. They say, I look at these CSB videos because it's a modern version that I like. And speaking of that, the New King James is not a version that I like. It's just closest to the Standard. That's why it's my number one. But the CSB being a modern version, yes, because I already have a Standard. The CSB is a version that I like. Okay? So I look at these CSB versions these CSV videos, and people just get on there out of nowhere and say, oh, you don't have to read King James to be saved. Where'd you pull that out of your butt crack, man? No, we're not even talking about the King James. But you just go to starting some crap with the King James. For what? Did the King James only tick you off that bad that you needed to just talk about your CSB and use talking about the CSB as an excuse to pick on the King James? You're waking an old man up from the dead and saying, let's fight. But yet, you don't want to fight fairly. You want to talk about it for a minute and then drop it after you place your insult. That is not the respect that the King James deserves. It deserves better respect. That's all I'm saying. It deserves better respect than that. It deserves better respect than that. That's what I'm looking to change. I don't read the King James, but I respect it as a standard because there's no way it is not the standard. It was the last Bible of its kind. And it is the grandfather of everything that you're looking at right now. And back then we had more of a Bible. We have more inspiration, if I believe that. You don't have to believe with me, but that's what I believe. Today we have half a Bible. All the goodies are there. There's still half a Bible. And there's some inspiration missing. Like some things should be left alone. Don't worry about literacy before you worry about inspiration. Inspired, speaking the Bible in a way that inspires us, is better than what's literal. Because what's literal is like, I went from being inspired to I can't even understand what that means. What is that coming off your tongue? What does that mean? Now you got to worry about what that means. But yet you want to complain about the archaism and the these and the thous. Give me a break. I'm out. God bless you. Thanks for watching.